Also state the obvious with parents that yes, it is a big, important decision when you hand over that first phone to your child who's not an adult yet, and it is an adult device typically out of the box, so giving that some thought.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is, especially now after the pandemic, but I said this before in 2015, I know I said this somewhere in some recording you could probably find, that it's not just about the phone. The phone gives a phone number, and it's cool to have your own phone, but the phone is just their own personal device that they somehow attach to. Just like back when I was 15, I liked having car keys in my hand. That felt cool. It wasn't my car; it was my dad's car, my mom's car, but it felt cool to have my own. That I was driving now.
I'm really practical at using tech to stay organized, because I think that this. All tech isn't bad and all screen time isn't bad. But our kids want this instant gratification, and sometimes they lose their ability to focus so much easier. So I'm trying to show them how to be on tech, but maintain their focus. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but that's generally what I do.
Mm-hmm.
And parents like it too, because parents usually don't realize that every device has some kind of do not disturb, and every, like there are a lot of features built in that people don't realize are there.
Right.
That are good.
But I think in terms of concerns and strengths and weaknesses and pros and cons, and the AI piece in terms of the concerns, and I'm a clinical psychologist by profession and training. So I think in terms of the clinical population where it's getting significant, whatever the symptoms are clinically significant, getting in interfering in the individual's life or the family's life. It's clinical. So that's the lens that I'm typically looking at. A huge part of my practice. Mm-hmm. And I often start off stating obvious things that people know, but are either just not actively thinking about, or there's some disconnect there that they just don't want to grab hold of. So the obvious place to start with parents is helping them think through what is the point of parenting. Mm-hmm. In a really basic way, that is, at least from my opinion, is to raise a future adult. Right. Is to not just keep them in a box and keep them safe. Obviously, that's all important, to keep them safe and help them function now. But it's really about, again, ever forward. How do we help them manage themselves into the future with some type of pocket-sized computer? We can call it a phone if you want, but it's a pocket-sized computer. Mm-hmm. With all the positives that we're going to talk about, and with real had years ago on a Chromebook, on a template, a tablet, on a, mm-hmm. So, again, I don't overdo that, but just kind of thinking through, the phone makes it even more portable and more personal, which changes things, and they're never going back once they have the phone. So it is an important decision, but it's not as monumental in terms of the access that the child now likely has as we may think.
Okay. So it leads perfectly into the promise and the perils of technology, which is the topic that you'll both be co-presenting on the first day of
join as best we can and not be just frustrated and, just put our heads in the sand and say, all right, well, let's assume this is not going to be a problem until it is. Right. That these are predictable, as I said earlier, predictable struggles that we are going to have as families and as educators that we can do something about to support them, to scaffold them into their young adulthood.
Mm-hmm. I've been having such a great time listening to the two of you. This has been just such a delight, really, to listen to you and interact with the two of you. I've learned so much, and I can't wait to tune into the conference to hear what you have to say. I did want to ask one last quick question, and I'm sure it could be an entire podcast, the effects of what COVID's effect, the remote learning on kids with special education. And I know it could be a long answer, but is there a way maybe you could just kind of give your perspective and some thoughts on that whole thing, and maybe some of the ramifications of that period and what's happening now? Joan, could you go first?
I can probably do a little bit quicker. My perspective. Yeah, I mean, I would say in terms of executive functioning, just like Adam said, I think attention spans are, I don't know if you said this exactly, but attention spans are getting reduced. We want to be entertained and we want instant gratification in this world. And so I think that kids really need to learn how to work at things over a period of time and break big chunks into, they're not being entertained all the time. When they're studying, they need to sit back and come up with good strategies to maximize learning and studying and remembering. And so we're so easily distracted by all of our technologies that we need to, minimize, really make a conscious effort to minimize distractions and to set timers so that we have sustained attention and get in the zone for good learning, and then take breaks like the Pomodoro technique, study for half an hour, take a 5-minute break or whatever works best for you, and have physical activity in your break. So I work a lot with families on this, like how get off of the tech and have sustained focus for a while. And then I work a lot with calendars and having different colors in the calendar, and reminders. It would be bad if I didn't deal with some of the other, because it's really needed.
Right.
And you don't want kids just having, free access. I mean, some can maybe, but most can't at a young age, or shouldn't.
Right. And I think we get caught up in this world of everybody has to have it, parents struggling when to expose their kids to it, a parent even just deciding at what age to give a phone to their child, and the pressures from their peers who have phones earlier, and, the need to catch up and be the same.
I didn't have to deal with all this because my kids are old enough that
great, right?
it wasn't a huge problem back then. It just wasn't, and but now